Morning breaks over the transport ship's deck with a pastel smear across the horizon, coral pinks bleeding into gunmetal grays. The deceptive beauty does nothing to ease the tension coiling in your gut. There's a bite to the salt-laced air that has nothing to do with the ocean spray. Part diesel fumes from idling engines, part the unspoken understanding that this place will demand more from you than you've ever had to give. The humid wind tugs at your jacket like insistent fingers while distant artillery thumps a slow, ominous heartbeat beneath the world's skin. You grip the rust-streaked railing, knuckles whitening. The odds aren't in your favor today. Before you drift into restless sleep tonight, maybe you'll hit like and subscribe if gritty World War II narratives are your thing. Drop a comment about which city you're watching from and what time it is there. It still blows my mind how these dust-choked stories manage to march across continents and decades. Now settle in. Let your pulse slow. We're stepping through time's curtain together. No flashy headlines, just the quiet, earth-shaking moments that forged a generation. Okinawa doesn't reveal itself in some cinematic sweep of pristine beaches and lush jungle. No, your first glimpse comes in fractured pieces through the transport ship's haze, like trying to assemble a puzzle with half the pieces missing. You squint past the morning mist to find a shoreline that's equal parts inviting and ominous. Palm trees sway with vacation postcard laziness, oblivious to the armada of steel and smoke crowding their waters. Further inland, the ridges hunch beneath the sky like sleeping giants, their flanks softened by sugarcane fields and tangled greenery. Rumor has it that beyond those ridges lies the island's heart, and coiled in that heart waits an enemy you've been hearing horror stories about for months. The deck vibrates beneath your boots from idling engines, the sound thrumming up through your bones. The water's crowded with ships, a floating city painted battleship gray. LSTs, destroyers, and supply ships sit at anchor like patient predators, each one bristling with antennae and the stubby snouts of anti-aircraft guns. Here and there, smoke tendrils curl from the coastline, calling cards from the pre-invasion bombardment. The Navy boys call it softening up the island, but you know better. It's about as subtle as a brass band playing taps at a funeral. Beside you, some farm kid from Iowa leans on the rail. Looks peaceful enough, he says in that tone that means he's not fooled for a second. You nod, but the stillness feels rehearsed, like an actor holding a smile a beat too long before the curtain rises. Historians still argue whether the Japanese defenders planned from day one to lure American forces inland rather than fight on the beaches. The truth? Depends who's buying the drinks that night. What's certain is that right now, the coastline gives nothing away. The air tastes different here, not the open ocean's clean salt, but something heavier. Damp vegetation, maybe, or the cloying sweetness of something decomposing. Could be the sugar cane, could be last season's monsoon rains. Or maybe it's just the scent of a place that's been waiting centuries for visitors it never wanted. Far out past the surf, a formation of gulls wheels against the light. Their white wings flash like semaphore signals. There's something comforting about seeing something so ordinary. The birds couldn't care less about flotillas or cargo nets. They're here for whatever the tide brings, same as their ancestors were 100 years ago. You file that thought away, your first small reminder that the world beyond this operation still turns on its normal axis. The ship's PA system crackles to life with a burst of static before some anonymous voice starts rattling off the day's schedule. It's part briefing, part pep talk, part reminder about when the chow line opens. You only half listen to the details about landing sequences and rally points. Your attention keeps getting pulled to the play of light on the water, glassy smooth one moment, then shivering into a million ripples the next, like something vast just stirred beneath the surface. Conversation ebbs and flows across the deck. Some guys lean hard into gallows humor, debating whether Navy coffee could double as paint thinner. Others go quiet, doing that private calculus about what's coming. You catch fragments of other battles, mentions of Saipan, Paliliu, names of buddies who didn't make it. These words move through the air like slow-moving shadows, impossible to ignore, but too heavy to hold onto for long. You tighten your grip on the rail and indulge in a fleeting fantasy that you're just some tourist arriving at a tropical paradise. In another life, maybe you'd be hauling a suitcase instead of a rifle, scanning the shoreline for the perfect spot to spread a beach towel. But the only towels here are canvas tarps thrown over ammo crates, and the shore's already being scarred by bulldozer blades. A Navy officer strolls past, binoculars glued to his face. You ask if he's seen much activity on the beach. Not yet, he says with that practiced nonchalance officer's perfect at Annapolis. But his white-knuckle grip on the binoculars tells another story. As the sun climbs higher, burning off the morning haze, more of the island comes into focus. Fishing shacks crouch among the palm groves, the glint of corrugated metal roofs. A dirt road that disappears into the greenery like a thread being pulled through fabric. Somewhere out there, unseen, are the people who built those huts, tended those fields. People who are probably watching this armada's arrival from whatever passes for a safe distance these days. There's a strange, suspended quality to this moment, like the island's holding its breath between heartbeats. You don't know yet how Okinawa's landscape will transform under the weight of men and machines, how it will change by the hour under artillery barges and tank treads. Right now, you've got just this postcard view and the growing awareness that postcards never tell the whole story. Someone taps your shoulder and points to a destroyer gliding past. On its deck, sailors stand at ease, some waving, others just watching you watch them. The ship's wake unfurls behind it like a silk ribbon, and for one perfect second, the whole scene is achingly beautiful. War has this way of slipping you moments like this, little pockets of grace wedged between the grinding gears of reality. The morning stretches on. They tell you the landing schedule's holding, but anyone who's been at this longer than 5 minutes knows schedules at sea are more like suggestions written in sand. You fill the waiting with small rituals, adjusting pack straps, checking your canteen cap for the 10th time, readying a bootlace that won't stay tied. When you look back at the shoreline, it hasn't changed, and yet it feels different. Like in the hours you've been watching, it's been slowly leaning in to meet you. So here you stand, first-time visitor to Okinawa, lulled by the creak and sway of the ship. The stretch of sea between you and the island is just wide enough to keep these two worlds apart. But not for long. You imagine stepping across that divide, feeling the sand give under your boots, the humidity soaking into your uniform, the beginning of whatever waits beyond the tree line. Somewhere a boat whistle pierces the air, sharp and bright against the engine's drone. Conversations stutter as heads turn toward the officer who's appeared with a clipboard. He starts calling names for the first wave. Your pulse kicks up a notch, not from surprise, you knew your name was coming, but from the sudden reality of it. That first glimpse of Okinawa is about to become something far more immediate. The days aboard the transport bleed together in a monotonous haze, each sunrise indistinguishable from the last, each hour slipping past without ceremony. You've lost count of how many dawns you've watched from this same patch of deck, and at this point, it hardly matters. Time here isn't measured in dates, but in routines. When you choke down another meal, when you clean your rifle for the 100th time, when you try to find a sleeping spot that isn't directly beneath a leaky pipe. Below deck, the air sits thick enough to chew, a noxious stew of engine fumes, damp wool, sweat, and the faint metallic tang of seawater that somehow seeps through every ventilation shaft. The bunks, if you can call them that, are stacked 3 high, each one barely wide enough for your shoulders. You've mastered the awkward sideways shuffle required to climb in without elbowing the guy next to you, though accidents still happen. Nobody complains. Everyone knows they'll do the same before this voyage ends. There's a strange rhythm to shipboard life. You wake not to a bugle, but to the scrape of boots and the clatter of mess tins. The breakfast line snakes along the bulkhead, each man cradling his tray like it's the last piece of home he'll ever hold. The meal might be powdered eggs congealing into something vaguely edible, or oatmeal that's decided to impersonate glue. Depends on the cook's mood, or possibly his grudge against humanity. The coffee is its own kind of legend, black as a moonless night, strong enough to wake the dead. One of the guys from Brooklyn swears it could strip paint. You take a cautious sip and feel your taste buds stage a protest. Historians still argue whether the Navy made the coffee intentionally potent to keep morale up or simply never learned another way to brew it. The truth depends who you ask. You claim a spot at one of the long mess tables, wedging yourself between men who smell like salt and exhaustion. Conversation drifts. Baseball scores from what feels like another lifetime. A girl back home who may or may not still be writing. The eternal debate over whether peanut butter or cheese spread counts as edible. There's laughter, some of it real, most of it the kind that covers up the quiet dread humming beneath every word. After breakfast, there's always something to do, even if it's the same damn thing you did yesterday. Clean your weapon. Again, wipe down your rifle until the metal gleams under the dim bulbs. Repack your gear, part habit, part superstition. A sergeant swings by to bark about inspections, though by now, nobody's gear has been truly clean since the day it left the factory. Topside, the world opens up. The sky stretches endlessly after the claustrophobic compartments below, and the Pacific sprawls in every direction, a shifting desert of blues and silvers. On calm days, the ship rocks just enough to make you sway like a drunk. On rough ones, you cling to the rail, praying your last meal stays where it belongs. Some kid from Kansas keeps a tally of who's puked the most, claims it's for morale. The losers beg to differ. The waiting is the worst part. You're close enough to Okinawa now that every passing hour feels like you're circling it, slow and inevitable. Rumors slither through the ship like currents, that the landing will be a cakewalk, that it'll be a slaughterhouse, that the Japanese have pulled back to fight inland, that they're waiting just beyond the surf. Every theory contradicts the last, and you've stopped trying to sort fact from fantasy. In the quieter moments, you catch yourself staring at the horizon. You can't see the island yet, but you know it's there. Sometimes you imagine what it looks like from shore. This gray armada looming on the water, the unnatural stillness before hell breaks loose. Other times, you just listen to the waves slapping the hull, the thud of boots overhead, the low murmur of men playing cards or scribbling letters they might never send. Mail call is a rare bright spot. The purser hands out envelopes like they're sacred relics. Some guys tear into them immediately, grinning at news from home. Others tuck them away like they're saving dessert for later. You once got a letter that smelled faintly of lilac perfume, and for one stupid moment, the whole compartment seemed brighter. Of course, not every day is calm. Drills shatter the monotony. Fire drills, abandoned ship drills, weapons checks. The alarm bell clangs, and suddenly everyone's moving, grabbing gear, hustling to assign stations without thinking. You've done it so many times it's muscle memory now, though you'll never live down that first attempt when you wound up on the wrong deck, staring at the wrong line of men. The ship carries more than just bodies. Crates of ammo, stacks of rations, even a few jeeps lashed to the deck like oversized luggage. You pass them daily, noting how every square inch is claimed, like the whole vessel has been packed like a seagoing footlocker, stuffed with everything someone might need when the ramps drop. Occasionally, a chaplain holds a short service in some corner of the mess or out on deck if the weather's decent. You've seen hardened men, guys who'd never set foot in a church back home, bow their heads for those few quiet minutes. The chaplain speaks softly, his voice nearly lost in the wind, but the words settle into the men like stones sinking into water. Night on the transport is its own world. The engine's hum becomes a lullaby if you let it, steady, low, a vibration you feel more than hear. You lie in your narrow bunk, tracing the pipes overhead with your eyes, listening to the ship sigh and creak around you. Somewhere close, a man mutters in his sleep. Somewhere farther off, a card game refuses to die, the clink of coins punctuating the laughter. One evening, you're on deck when the moon rises, a silver coin dropped into the dark. The light spills across the water, turning the swells into liquid mercury. For a heartbeat, you forget where you are. Forget what's coming. You're just a man on a ship in the middle of an endless ocean, watching the same moon that's risen over 1,000,000 other nights. It's a small, perfect moment of peace, and you tuck it away in your mind like a keepsake. But mornings always come, and with them, the slow return of tension. The officers talk more about the operation now. Maps appear in corners of the deck, men bent over them, tracing routes with calloused fingers. You lean in when you can, catching phrases like first wave and shore batteries. The words are clinical, detached, but you can feel the weight behind them. You know you'll leave the ship soon. You don't know if you'll miss it, the cramped bunks, the paint stripper coffee, the mind-numbing monotony. But it's been your whole world for these days at sea, and soon enough, the horizon will shift, and the transport will be just another memory you carry onto the beach. You stand at the rail one last time, staring down at the water, gray-green and restless, when the order finally comes. Gear up. It rolls through the ship like a current. Shouts from the petty officers, boots pounding on steel decks, the metallic chorus of buckles and clips snapping into place. After days of waiting, the shift from stillness to motion feels sudden, almost surreal. The cargo nets sway against the hull, thick ropes slick with salt spray. You check your pack again, rifle slung, canteen full, extra ammo pouches secure. Your buddy from Iowa grins, going for casual. Just a little boat ride, he says, though his eyes keep flicking toward the shoreline. The first wave is already loading below, landing craft bobbing like toys at the ship's side, each one crammed with soldiers hunched under their packs. The coxswains bark orders over the engine noise, their voices barely audible above the hiss of the sea. You can smell the exhaust drifting up, acrid, oily, the scent of something irreversible beginning. Your turn comes faster than expected. The net swings toward you, and suddenly you're climbing over the rail, boots searching for purchase. The ropes bite into your palms as you descend, the ocean heaving beneath you like a living thing. Halfway down, the ship's steel flank blocks out everything else, a wall of rivets and shadows, and you're just a speck crawling down its side. The landing craft rises with the swell, then drops, then rises again. You time your last steps with the motion, releasing the net and dropping into the boat's belly. Your knees absorb the impact on instinct. The man beside you shifts to make space without a word. Salt spray mists your face immediately, cold against the heat building under your helmet. Around you, men settle onto the narrow benches, packs pressed against knees, rifles pointing skyward in a bristling forest of barrels. The boat rocks in the trough between waves, water slapping the sides with hollow thuds. The coxswain glances back at the ship, waiting for the signal. You feel the engine's vibration through the deck plates, a low, impatient growl. Then the signal comes. A quick arm motion from above, and the boat lurches forward. The bow swings toward open water. The transport begins to shrink behind you. And just like that, you're moving. The first thing you notice when your boots hit the beach isn't the gunfire or the chaos. It's the crunch. Not the soft give of vacation postcard sand, but the gritty resistance of coral fragments and crushed shells beneath your soles. The water recedes behind you in a warm rush, leaving thin rivulets trickling past your ankles like whispered warnings. The air smells different here. Sharper, salt still dominant, but now threaded with something green and earthy, like grass after a hard rain. All around, the organized bedlam of a beachhead roars to life. Bulldozers growl as they carve makeshift berms from the sand. Jeeps, still dripping seawater from their landing, sputter and cough before lurching forward. Supply crews heave crates off amphibious trucks, stacking them into temporary towers that rise like strange monuments. It's like watching a city spring up and fast forward. Canvas tents blooming, radio antennas sprouting, the whole chaotic ballet set to the slap of waves and the constant drone of ship engines offshore. Navy beachmasters stride through the mess, their bright helmet bands making them easy to spot. Clipboards in hand, they bark orders with a mix of precision and theatrical exasperation. You hear one yelling at a driver, "Try not to flatten the whole damn beach in your first hour," which earns tired grins from the men nearby. You pick your way around a tangle of supply lines, thick, wet ropes snaking back toward the water like umbilical cords, and pause to take in the view inland. The palm trees are closer than you expected, their shade dark and cool looking after the glare of open sand. Beyond them, the land rises in gentle folds, the higher ridges softened by distance. Somewhere up there is Shuri, you've been told. Though right now, it's hard to imagine anything ancient or strategic in this hazy morning light. Off to your right, a small group of Okinawan civilians stands just beyond the work zone. They watch silently, hands at their sides, expressions unreadable. A Navy interpreter approaches them with a nod, and though you can't hear the exchange, you see the careful gestures, open palms, slow movements. Historians still debate how much the locals understood about the battle unfolding around them in those early days. The truth depends who's telling the story, but their presence adds another layer to this place, a reminder that this isn't just terrain to be taken, it's someone's home. You rejoin your squad near a stack of crates stenciled with codes only the supply sergeant seems to decipher. The plan, as far as anyone's explained, is to secure this sector before pushing inland. That means hours, maybe days, of unloading, digging, and organizing before the real movement starts. The sergeant mutters something about finding this sweet spot for foxholes, where the sand is firm enough to hold shape but soft enough to dig without breaking your shovel. You consider joking that he should test it first, but the look on his face suggests now isn't the time. A crane swings overhead, its cable whining as it lowers a jeep onto the sand. The driver hops in before the riggers finish unhooking it, gunning the engine with a spray of sand and a whoop that cuts through the noise. Nearby, an engineer team assembles a radio mast, its metal sections telescoping upward until it stands taller than the palm trees. The radio man gives it an affectionate tap, like patting a reliable dog, before ducking into his shelter to start sending reports back to the ships. You drop your pack for a moment, rolling your shoulders to ease the ache. The straps have already dug grooves into your muscles. Around you, men move in constant motion, passing ammo cans hand to hand, laying down wooden planks for vehicles, marking lanes with hastily driven stakes. Somewhere behind you, medics are raising a tent, its red cross stark against the pale canvas. The sun climbs higher, and with it, the heat becomes a physical weight. Sweat soaks into your helmet's webbing, trickles down your spine. You loosen your collar, but the air offers no relief, thick and warm as bathwater. A buddy offers a sip from his canteen, and you trade him a bite of your peanut butter ration. It's stiff from the heat, but the familiar taste sparks a fleeting memory of childhood lunches. A Navy crew starts laying down metal matting, linking the perforated sections together to form a crude road. The clank and rattle of each piece rings sharp over the deeper engine noises. You can almost feel the beach transforming underfoot, less a natural shoreline, more a functional platform for war. Despite the chaos, there's an undercurrent of calm professionalism. No one's rushing headlong. Movements are deliberate, measured. The officers keep reminding everyone this is still the vulnerable phase. No one wants to give away positions with unnecessary noise or confusion. The warships offshore keep their watch, gray silhouettes steady on the horizon. You glance seaward and spot another wave of landing craft coming in. Their wakes slice white trails across the blue, converging on the beach like spokes toward a hub. More men, more supplies, more machines. The slow, steady buildup of an operation meant to sustain itself for weeks. The sight is oddly reassuring. You're not alone here, not even close. By midday, your hands are raw from hauling crates and wrestling sandbags. You pause at the water's edge, letting the gentle surf cool your palms. The ocean feels almost friendly now, its rhythm a counterpoint to the industrial clatter behind you. You watch the sunlight dance on the ripples, liquid gold shifting to green and back again. One of the engineers walks past with a coil of cable over his shoulder. "Pretty spot," he says without breaking stride. Once you get past the whole invasion thing, you laugh, surprised by how natural it sounds. It's been a long time since laughter didn't feel borrowed. As afternoon stretches on, the first makeshift shelters take shape. Canvas tarps slung over poles, dugouts with corrugated roofs, even a few ambitious attempts at furniture using driftwood from the high tide line. It's amazing how quickly men can turn bare ground into something resembling home, or at least a halfway decent imitation. By sunset, the beachhead has its own rhythm. The noise softens to a low hum. The smell of cooking drifts from a mess line somewhere down the sand. Something canned, something fried. You're exhausted, sore, and gritty, but there's a quiet pride in seeing this stretch of shore transformed from empty sand to a secured foothold. You settle onto a crate, looking inland as shadows lengthen across the ridges. Somewhere beyond that green fringe, the next chapter waits. But for now, the beach thrums with its own energy, and you let yourself breathe in the moment. The order to move inland comes not with a dramatic speech, but as casually as someone mentioning the weather. "We're pushing forward," your sergeant says, pointing to a break in the palm fringe. Follow the cane trail. No fanfare, no stirring music, just simple instructions that set your boots moving toward the trees. You shoulder your pack and step off the beach. The air changes immediately, thicker, heavier, saturated with the scent of wet soil and crushed vegetation. The trail narrows, barely wide enough for 2 men abreast, walls of sugarcane rising taller than your head on either side. Their leaves hiss in the breeze, a sound like whispering voices. The ground isn't sand anymore. It's packed earth giving way to patches of sticky mud. Your boots sink slightly with each step. Someone mutters, "Okinawa's less an island, more a giant sponge." And despite everything, you grin. The humidity clings like a damp shirt. You're sweating within minutes. The march is steady but slow. The beach sounds fading behind you, muffled now by the green walls. Somewhere ahead, a bird calls, a high, clear note that seems out of place. For a moment, it almost feels like a hike back home. Then you see the tire tracks in the mud, a reminder that you're following paths others have already worn. The sunlight filters through the cane in shifting stripes, painting your arms with moving shadows. It's beautiful in a way you didn't expect, though the beauty feels fragile, like a stage set that could collapse at any moment. Historians still debate whether these inland routes were chosen for concealment or simply because they were the only passable paths. The truth? It hardly matters now. You keep your eyes on the man ahead, his pack swaying slightly with each step, a rhythmic, almost hypnotic motion. The line pauses occasionally, just long enough to adjust straps, wipe sweat, shift rifle slings, then moves again without a word. At one point, you pass a small hut half hidden in the cane. Its thatched roof sags with age, tools stacked neatly by the door. No one's visible, but the place feels lived in. You wonder if the owners are among the civilians you saw earlier, or if they've gone deeper inland, away from the noise. The trail bends, then opens into a clearing where the ground rises slightly. Here, the cane gives way to grass and shrubs, sunlight suddenly bright and glaring. You pause to drink, water warm from your canteen, but still welcome. A corporal offers you a piece of hard candy. "For morale," he says with a tired smile. From this slight rise, you catch glimpses of the ridges ahead, darker green, more sharply defined. They loom like the spine of some sleeping creature, their folds hiding whatever comes next. You know better than to assume they're empty. As the column moves on, the path narrows again, forcing single file. Cane leaves brush your helmet with a papery rustle. The air in these green tunnels is stifling. Sweat runs down your temples, soaks into your shirt. Somewhere behind you, a man hums off-key, the sound weirdly comforting in the closeness. The mud deepens in low spots, sucking at your boots with each step. You use the cane stalks for balance when needed. The gully you enter narrows, then widens, the ground firming again, one world giving way to another without ceremony. A brief rest lets you notice the smaller things, dragonflies darting through sunbeams, ants marching in determined lines, a butterfly floating past on cream and rust wings. These tiny lives continue uninterrupted, a quiet reminder that the world operates on scales larger than your own. When you reach the next clearing, a wider space with a shallow stream cutting through, the whole squad seems to exhale. The water is clear, running over smooth stones. You kneel to rinse your face, the cold a shock to your sweat-slick skin. A buddy does the same, then shakes his head like a wet dog, spraying droplets everywhere. The laughter feels good. Across the stream, the climb isn't steep, but the soft earth makes it feel longer. You dig in with each step, using your rifle as a walking stick when needed. At the top, you pause to look back. The cane sways gently, already erasing your passage. The sergeant signals to keep moving. The line pushes into mixed forest, trees broader than cane, their trunks wrapped in vines. The light turns green and cool under the canopy. Fallen leaves muffle footsteps. It's quieter here, the insect hum muted, as if the forest itself is listening. By late afternoon, you've covered more ground than you realized. The trail has shifted from mud to firm earth, from dense cane to open woodland. Your shoulders ache, your throat is dry again, but the rhythm of movement carries you. Each step taking you farther from the beach's noise, deeper into whatever waits ahead. When the order finally comes to halt for the day, you're at the edge of another clearing. The squad fans out, scanning the area before settling in. You drop your pack with a grunt, rolling your shoulders. The air here feels different, still heavy, but with a hint of coolness suggesting higher elevation. You take a long look around. The sugarcane is far behind now. The ridges ahead are closer, more defined. The day's march has been quiet, steady, strangely calming in its routine. You're not at Okinawa's heart yet, but you're on your way. The first real work inland isn't about glory or combat. It's about the shovel. Your entrenching tool becomes an extension of your arms, its short handle already blistered into your palm from days of use. The sergeant points to a patch of uneven ground speckled with coral outcroppings. "Home sweet home, boys," he says with that particular brand of humor that's equal parts joke and warning. You drop your pack and unfold the shovel with practiced motions. The ground looks innocent enough, dirt and pale sand scattered with pebbles, but the first strike tells the truth. There's coral beneath the surface, layers of it packed hard as concrete. What follows is less digging and more like negotiating with the earth, jabbing, prying, scraping until a stubborn chunk finally breaks loose. Around you, the squad grunts and curses through the same struggle, each man locked in his private battle with Okinawa's geology. A buddy from Georgia leans on his shovel, wiping sweat with his sleeve. "If the enemy don't get us," he pants, "this coral sure as hell will." You laugh, but the truth in it sticks. After 20 minutes, you've carved something that might charitably be called a foxhole, a shallow oval barely deep enough to trip over. The rhythm becomes meditative despite the burning in your shoulders. Shovel in, pry out, toss aside. Coral chunks pile up beside you, sharp-edged and bone-white. You'll use them later to line the floor, keeping the hole from turning into a mud pit when the rains come, which, judging by the heavy air, could be any minute now. Small movements in the dirt catch your attention, tiny crabs scuttling away from the disturbance. One pauses at the edge of your excavation, its eye stalks swiveling in what looks like disapproval before vanishing under a coral fragment. The absurdity makes you grin. First local to inspect your work, an Okinawan land crab. Historians still debate whether these positions were chosen for tactical advantage or simply wherever a shovel could make progress. The truth depends which veteran you're buying drinks for. Eventually, you carve out something respectable, shoulder deep with a ledge for your rifle and a niche for your pack. You climb in to test the fit. Cramped, but yours. The view is a slice of sky framed by ragged coral edges. The soundtrack, wind through cane and murmured voices from nearby holes. Around late afternoon, the digging slows. Most of the squad has reached various stages of completion, some men lining their holes with scavenged materials, others still wrestling with stubborn roots. The air shifts, carrying that ozone scent that precedes rain. It arrives within the hour with no preamble, fat drops drumming on helmets, hissing into the ground. Within minutes, coral piles gleam wet, paths between holes turn to slick mud. You scramble to drape your poncho over the position, punching as water cascades down. Staying dry proves impossible. Dampness finds every gap, trickling down collars, seeping into sleeves. Yet there's an odd coziness to being dug in. You lean back against the earth wall, legs stretched out, watching rain blur the world. Ridges fade into mist. Cane shimmers under the downpour. Everything smells washed clean. It would be peaceful if not for the reason you're here. When the storm passes, the world feels renewed. Colors deepen, greens almost glowing, sky pale silver blue. Steam rises from the ground in lazy tendrils. Men emerge from holes stretching like creatures uncurling from hibernation. Your boots squelch in softened earth as you inspect the damage, some collapsed walls, but your coral lining held. Dinner arrives as rations pass down the line. You trade canned meatloaf for someone's beans, while another man brews instant coffee in a dented canteen cup over a tiny flame. It tastes faintly of metal, but it's hot and strong, ambrosia after the rain. As light fails, the squad settles in. Some men swap stories, half-remembered tales from home or exaggerated accounts of training mishaps. Others simply sit in their holes, watching daylight fade through amber to violet. Fireflies appear, their brief sparks dancing at the edge of vision. The sergeant makes his rounds, pausing at your position. Good depth, he nods, then adds. Coral's a bitch, but it'll hold. High praise in this world. Night brings its own symphony. Insect chorus swelling, frogs adding bass notes from rain-filled hollows somewhere distant, an owl calls. You sit with rifle across your knees, watching the foxhole's rectangle of sky. Stars emerge, faint through lingering clouds. Somewhere in the dark, a buddy whispers a joke you can't quite catch. The laughter that follows blends into the island's nighttime hum. You let your eyes close, just for a moment, feeling the earth hold you as steady as any bed. Morning comes gradually, more a lightening of the sky than a sudden dawn. You're already awake when color seeps into your hole, shoulders stiff from coral contours, uniform damp with dew. Rising, you skin the ridge line now visible through the lifting mist. Sunlight catches the tops of grasses, shadows still pool in the folds. And there it is, the Shuri line. From here, it's not some imposing fortress, just a series of green folds stacking toward the horizon. But you've heard enough to know, somewhere in those ridges is a castle turned stronghold, both ancient and deadly modern. The sergeant appears, hands in pockets, studying the view. There she is, he says quietly, as if speaking too loud might wake something. He doesn't need to name it. Everyone knows Shuri Castle anchors the defensive belt across Okinawa's waist. Historians still argue whether Japanese commanders chose Shuri for its symbolism or simply its commanding position. The truth? It doesn't matter. Those ridges ahead aren't landscape. They're the campaign's pivot point. Breakfast is quick. Ration bars, lukewarm coffee, can fruit if you're lucky. Then it's gear up and move out. Today's trail is less forgiving. Narrow switchbacks where roots trip your boots, inclines that burn thighs. The cane thins as you climb, replaced by thicker brush and jagged rock outcrops. The squad moves staggered, each man keeping space but staying close enough for quick signals. Talk is sparse today, not from fear, but a collective focus on what's ahead. The land itself seems to pull you forward. An hour in, you crest a rise where the ridge line unfolds in full view, steep gullies cutting into slopes, rocky spines jutting like knuckled fists. Somewhere in those folds are positions dug deep enough to disappear battalions. The sergeant studies them silently, already calculating approaches. The wind here carries new scents, wood smoke faint beneath something earthier, like damp stone. A reminder these ridges aren't empty. People live here. Others have prepared to ensure you don't pass easily. You pass collapsed stone walls, maybe ancient field boundaries, maybe something more recent. Then you notice the sandbags tucked behind them, boot scuffs in the dirt. These aren't relics. The thought lingers as you move on. Another vantage point reveals southern Okinawa spread below, the thin coastal road, the pale beachhead, the fleet like gray toys on the horizon. Seeing it all compressed into one view is surreal. Feels like we've come far, says the Iowa farm boy beside you. You nod, though you both know it's barely begun. The ridges loom closer now, their shadows stretching longer as afternoon deepens. By midday, heat presses down like a physical weight. You sip water sparingly, loosen your collar. The trail winds along a steep rise, brush close on both sides. Occasionally, you glimpse upward, rock faces pocked with crevices, trees clinging at impossible angles. At a spring seeping between stones, men refill canteens despite the medic's purification tablet warnings. You splash your face. The shock makes your eyes water. Higher up, vegetation shifts, scrubby pines, wiry grasses that bend in wind. The air smells resinous now. Insect noise thins to occasional chirps. A rest halt brings hard candy passed around. Lemon today, the tartness sharpening your mouth. Small comforts, but they stick. The castle remains hidden by ridges, but you feel its presence, like something watching just beyond sight. The final climb is steepest. Boots slip on loose soil, packs shift uncomfortably. You use your rifle as a staff on bad sections, planting it firmly for leverage. Breathing grows loud in your ears. Heartbeat pounds in sync with footsteps. At the top, the view is both reward and challenge. Ridges and valleys ripple towards Shuri's heart. Beautiful in its way, sunlight catching grass tops, shadows deep in folds. But also a reminder, the easy climbing's done. You stand there a moment, wind washing over you. Somewhere behind is the beach. Ahead, the castle waits. Shouldering your pack, you know tomorrow takes you closer. Then the first raindrop hits your sleeve. Within minutes, the air shifts, light dims, wind edges cooler, leaves start rustling in gathering breeze. You glance up, clouds boiling in from the southeast, gray on gray like wet wool being dragged across sky. No one needs to say it. You all know Okinawan rain doesn't knock, it kicks the door in. The rain arrives like an invading army. No gentle warning drizzle, just a sudden deluge that turns the world into a watercolor painting left out in the storm. Within minutes, the ridge line becomes a series of blurred shapes. The trail beneath your boots transforming into a shallow river of red mud that clings like quicksand. Your poncho does little against the horizontal sheets of water. Rain finds every gap, trickling down your collar, seeping into your boots, turning your rifle into a 5-pound weight of soaked wood and metal. The squad moves in slow motion, each step requiring careful balance as the mud tries to steal your boots with every lift. Monsoon my ass, someone grumbles behind you. This is God pissing on us personally. The trail narrows into a trough, funneling rainwater into a knee-deep torrent that swirls around your legs. Your uniform becomes a second skin, the wool scratching like sandpaper against your thighs. Somewhere up ahead, a man loses his footing with a wet slap and a string of creative curses. Historians still argue whether these spring downpours actually slowed the American advance or just made everyone miserable. Right now, as cold water finds its way into places water shouldn't be, you couldn't care less about historical debate. At a rocky outcrop, the squad bunches together under a slight overhang, a temporary reprieve from the worst of it. Men tilt their helmets back, breathing hard. Someone produces a miraculously dry cigarette from a waterproof tin, the flare of the match illuminating faces gone pale with cold. The smoke curls upward, strangely beautiful against the gray chaos. Then it's back into the maelstrom. The downhill slope becomes a mudslide, each step an exercise in controlled falling. You use your rifle as a walking stick, the bayonet scabbard sinking deep with each probing thrust. The valley below has turned into a shallow lake, the standing water reflecting the storm-dark sky like broken mirrors. There's a rhythm to the misery. Step, sink, pull. Step, sink, pull. Your mind detaches, floating somewhere above the slog. You notice odd details. How raindrops shatter into silver spray when they hit rocks. How the grass flattens in waves before springing back. The precise musical note of water dripping from your helmet brim into a puddle. By midday, the rain slackens from biblical to merely miserable. The squad pauses near a bamboo grove, steam rising from soaked uniforms as the sun makes a half-hearted appearance. A buddy wrings out his socks with theatrical disgust. I swear I saw a fish swim past my knees back there. The afternoon march becomes a strange kind of dance, part hiking, part waiting. The mud never dries, just changes consistency from peanut butter to cold grease. You pass through sections where the cane leans overhead like a green cathedral, the leaves brushing your helmet with a sound like rustling parchment. When the sergeant finally calls halt near dusk, the rain has stopped, but the world remains soaked. The squad peels off layers, hanging ponchos from tree branches like sad ghosts. Someone gets a fire going with miraculously dry kindling from his pack's innermost sanctum. The smell of burning bamboo mixes with wet wool and steam. Dinner is whatever hasn't dissolved into mush. Crackers transformed into paste, cheese spread that now resembles yellow paint. You eat it anyway, crouched near the sputtering flames. The coffee tastes like heaven, even with its notes of mud and metal. As night falls, the jungle comes alive, frogs tuning up in newly filled ponds, insects testing their wings after the deluge. You settle into your assigned watch position, a shallow scrape in the lee of a boulder. The moon breaks through ragged clouds, turning puddles into mercury pools. Somewhere out there, Shuri Castle waits, dry and ancient on its ridge. You imagine its stone walls shedding water like a duck's back, untouched by the storm that's turned you into a walking sponge. The thought should anger you, but mostly it makes you tired. Your fingers find the letter in your breast pocket, the one that smelled like lilacs. It's damp now, the ink probably blurred, but you don't take it out to check. Some things are better left imagined. The watch passes in a haze of exhaustion and cold. At some point, you realize you're humming, some half-remembered tune from basic training. It blends with the jungle's night music until you can't tell where your voice ends and the night begins. When your relief comes, you don't even pretend to sleep. Just lie there in your damp blanket, staring at the sky between tree branches, counting the stars that dare show themselves after the storm. Morning brings steam rising from the ground as the sun reclaims its territory. The squad moves like stiff puppets, peeling damp clothes from skin, lacing boots that may never truly dry. The sergeant makes his rounds, checking feet for trench rot with the clinical detachment of a man who's seen too much of it. Another day in paradise, he mutters as he passes you, pausing just long enough to see your blistered heels. You trade your last dry socks for a tube of foot powder from the medic, a deal that feels both desperate and entirely fair. The trail today is firmer, the earth having drunk its fill. You notice things you missed in yesterday's downpour, wildflowers pushing through crushed grass, a spiderweb bejeweled with droplets, the way sunlight filters through leaves in shifting patterns. At a stream crossing, the squad halts to refill canteens. You kneel beside the water, watching minnows dart between your shadow's fingers. For a moment, you're 7 years old again at your grandfather's fishing hole, the war just some distant rumor. Then the column moves on, the spell broken. The ridges grow steeper, the vegetation tougher, vines that grab at your pack, thorns that leave thin red lines on your arms. The castle remains hidden, but its presence looms larger with each step. By midday, you're high enough to see the ocean again, a thin blue line on the horizon that might as well be another planet. The squad rests in the shade of an oddly shaped boulder that someone dubs the Turtle. Rations are passed around with the usual trading. Your fruit cocktail for someone's peanut butter, 2 cigarettes for a square of chocolate. The afternoon brings a new kind of terrain, rocky outcroppings that force detours, sudden drops masked by ferns. You learn to test each step, the ground unreliable after the rains. At one point, the trail disappears entirely, swallowed by a landslide. The squad picks its way across carefully, each man bracing the next. When you finally reach the ninth bivouac, a relatively flat stretch of pine needles, the relief is palpable. No one speaks much as shelters go up. Rifles are cleaned, feet are inspected. There's a shared understanding that today wasn't the hardest day, nor will it be the last. Dinner is hot at least. Some clever soul has rigged a stove from a fuel can. The smell of heating rations almost covers the scent of wet wool and sweat. You eat slowly, savoring the warmth as much as the taste. The talk around the fire is quieter tonight. No jokes about the rain, no exaggerated stories. Just men sharing fragments of home, how spring smelled in their hometowns, the way the light fell through certain windows at certain hours. You offer your own small memory, the sound of screen doors slamming on summer nights. It feels both precious and ridiculous to speak of such things here, but no one laughs. Later, on watch, you stare at the silhouette of the ridge against the stars. Somewhere up there, the castle waits. Tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that, you'll see it for yourself. For now, there's just this moment, the cool air on your face, the ache in your legs, the quiet breathing of sleeping men at your back. You shift your rifle to the other shoulder and keep watching. The night smells like wet earth and pine. Somewhere, an owl calls. You wonder if it's the same one from before the storm, or if the rain took that one too. The first glimpse of Shuri Castle comes not with fanfare, but through a gap in the morning mist, its silhouette emerging like a ship materializing from fog. The dawn light catches the curve of its tiled roofs, turning them the color of dried blood against the pale sky. From this distance, it's not the imposing fortress you imagined, but something quieter, older, its walls softened by centuries of weather and war. The sergeant walks the line, his boots crunching on the gravel path. "There she is," he says, as if introducing an old acquaintance. No need to name it. Every man here knows this is the heart of Okinawa's defenses, the anchor point for the entire Shuri line. Breakfast is a hurried affair. Cold rations eaten standing up, eyes flickering between bites toward the distant castle. The coffee tastes like burnt toast and nostalgia, the last dregs from someone's carefully hoarded supply. You sip slowly, letting the bitterness anchor you to the moment. Historians still argue whether the Japanese chose Shuri for its strategic high ground or its symbolic weight as the ancient seat of Ryukyu kings. Right now, as you tighten your pack straps and check your rifle's action, the distinction feels academic. The trail winds upward through terraced fields, some still tended, others gone wild between crumbling stone walls. The air smells different here, less salt and mud, more pine resin, and something faintly floral. A butterfly drifts across your path, its orange wings bright against the green, absurdly delicate in this place of war. Mid-morning brings you to a hamlet tucked between ridges, a handful of stone houses with their doors gaping empty. Fresh flowers sit in a chipped vase by a roadside shrine, their petals startlingly vibrant against the gray stone. You pause just long enough to wonder who still comes here to pay respects before moving on. The castle grows larger with each switchback, its details coming into focus. The layered walls rising like steps, the darker patches where repairs have been made, the way its gates seem to swallow the sunlight. You catch yourself running a hand along one of the ancient retaining walls, fingers tracing the grooves worn by generations of hands. At a rest halt, you trade a cigarette for a square of chocolate with a buddy from Boston. He nods toward the castle. Think the locals minded when the army moved in. You both glance at the fresh gun emplacements barely concealed among the historic stones, the perfect marriage of ancient fortress and modern warfare. The final approach is steeper than it looks, the path narrowing to single file between moss-covered boulders. Your breath comes harder here, the altitude or the tension tightening your chest. The castle walls loom overhead now, close enough to see the individual stones, their surfaces pocked by weather and time. Then, suddenly, you're there. The path opens onto a broad terrace, the castle's main gate standing dark before you. The squad fans out automatically, weapons ready, eyes scanning the high walls. Nothing moves but a scrap of canvas flapping from a makeshift observation post. The silence is its own kind of noise. You expected gunfire, shouts, the chaos of assault. Instead, there's just the wind sighing through the castle's empty courtyards, the creak of your pack straps, the too loud click of your safety being switched off. The sergeant motions you forward into the shadow of the gate. The stone arch swallows sound, your boots echoing oddly on the worn steps. Inside, the courtyard stretches wide and empty, its gravel paths raked into perfect lines as if awaiting visitors who will never come. You notice three things at once: the intricate carvings on the wooden eaves, the bullet scars on the plaster walls, and the overwhelming smell of incense clinging to the air despite the absence of priests. Somewhere ahead, a door bangs in the wind, a hollow, lonesome sound. The squad moves carefully, clearing building after building. Storehouses turned into ammunition dumps, ceremonial halls lined with radio equipment, ancient shrines converted into first aid stations. Each space tells the same story. The Japanese left in a hurry. In an inner courtyard, you find the first real evidence of resistance. A sandbag position overlooking the main gate. Its machine gun still in place, but cold to the touch. Empty shell casings glitter in the sunlight, scattered like copper coins. "Clever bastards," mutters the sergeant, towing a discarded map. New and to fold. The realization settles over the squad. Shuri Castle, the linchpin of Okinawa's defenses, has been abandoned without a fight. The afternoon is spent securing the complex, checking for booby traps, marking cleared buildings. You're assigned to watch the southern wall, where the view stretches across half of Okinawa. The ridges you crossed, the valleys still holding pockets of resistance, and far in the distance, the thin blue line of the sea. The castle feels strangely alive beneath you, its stones warm from the sun, its shadows deep and cool. You run a hand along the parapet, imagining the kings and diplomats who stood here before you, gazing at this same view in quieter times. By dusk, the squad has gathered in the main courtyard, trading rumors. The Japanese have pulled back to final defensive lines. The castle's abandonment is a trap. The war might end by Christmas. You listen without comment, chewing slowly on a stale cracker. The sergeant appears with a pot of actual brewed coffee, liberated from some officers' quarters. It's terrible and wonderful all at once. The first hot drink in days that doesn't taste like tin or mud. You cradle the cup like something precious, letting the steam warm your face. Night falls softly on Shuri Castle. The stars seem brighter here, the air clearer. You take first watch on the eastern wall, your back against centuries-old stone. Somewhere below, an owl calls, the same lonely sound you've heard every night since landing, as if the same bird has been following your progress inland. The castle whispers around you, the creak of old wood settling, the flutter of bats in the rafters, the distant murmur of men trying to sleep. You stare out at the darkened landscape, tracing the ridges you crossed, the paths you carved through cane and mud. Somewhere out there, the war continues. But for tonight, Shuri Castle is yours, its history layered beneath your boots, its walls standing silent guard. You shift your rifle to a more comfortable position and watch the moon rise over Okinawa, wondering how many soldiers before you have done the same. The night at Shuri Castle passes in uneasy quiet, not the deep silence of abandonment, but the watchful hush of a place holding its breath. You spend your guard shift leaning against ancient stonework, feeling the day's warmth slowly bleed from the rocks into your back. The stars wheel overhead in unfamiliar patterns, too bright, too close, like someone punched holes in a black canvas to let the light shine through. At some point, the Iowa farm boy relieves you. He doesn't speak, just nods toward the southern horizon where occasional flashes betray distant artillery duels. You pass him the last swallow of cold coffee like a ceremonial torch before stumbling toward the makeshift barracks, a converted storehouse that smells of mildew and old rice. Sleep comes in fits. The castle creaks around you, with settling, wind whistling through gaps in the shutters, the occasional scuttle of something small in the rafters. You dream of coral digging into your back, then wake to find you've rolled onto your entrenching tool. Dawn filters through cracks in the wooden walls, painting stripes of gold across the dirt floor. Men stir around you, coughing, groaning, the symphony of an army waking. Outside, the morning air carries the scent of wet stone and something floral. Maybe the white blossoms clinging to vines on the castle walls. The sergeant appears in the doorway, backlit by sunrise. "We're holding position today," he announces, as if this is news anyone would celebrate. "Command wants the castle secured before we push further." Breakfast is a quiet affair, cold rations eaten while leaning against sun-warmed walls. You trade your fruit cocktail for a packet of instant coffee that may have been manufactured before the war. It dissolves into your canteen cup with suspicious reluctance, leaving gritty sediment at the bottom. Your assigned duty is perimeter checks, walking the castle's outer walls with a buddy from Alabama who claims he can smell Japanese soldiers. like wet wool and gun oil. He insists, nostrils flaring at every breeze. You humor him, though mostly you're watching for tripwires and disturbed earth. The castle reveals itself slowly as you patrol. Here, a hidden alcove with centuries of graffiti carved into the stone. There, a sniper's nest artfully concealed behind what looks like original woodwork. Everywhere, the lingering evidence of hurried departure. Abandoned ration tins with kanji labels, a single leather boot standing upright as if its owner evaporated mid-step. At the eastern wall, you find a courtyard where time seems suspended. A gnarled tree grows at its center, its trunk twisted into shapes that suggest pain or great age. Beneath it, a stone bench holds a perfect circle of condensation from someone's canteen, recent enough that the water hasn't evaporated. Officers, mutters your buddy, kicking at the dirt. Always got to have their comforts. Midday brings a hot meal. Actual cooked stew hauled up from the beachhead in insulated containers. The meat is unidentifiable but tender, the carrots soft as butter. You eat slowly, savoring each mouthful like it might be your last decent food for weeks. The cook watches with arms crossed, nodding approvingly when you hold up your empty tin. The afternoon stretches long and lazy. Some men nap in patches of sunlight. Others play endless hands of poker using pebbles as chips. You find a quiet spot on the southern parapet where the view stretches all the way to the sea. The ocean glitters like shattered glass, the fleet tiny as toys in the distance. A shadow falls across you. The sergeant drops down with a grunt, offering a cigarette from his dwindling supply. For a while, you just sit there passing it back and forth, watching smoke curl into the still air. Funny thing, he says finally. Expected more fight from this place. You follow his gaze to the bullet scars on the courtyard walls, the sandbag positions left intact. The castle feels like a stage set after the actors have gone home. All the props in place, but the story moved elsewhere. As evening approaches, the squad gathers for orders. The lieutenant, a baby-faced replacement who still blushes when he curses, unfolds a map weighted with stones at each corner. Japanese forces have established new lines here, and here, he says, tapping ridges to the south. We move out at dawn to support Baker Company's push. The men absorb this in silence. Somewhere beyond those ridges lies the rest of the war, waiting to be finished. Dinner is another miracle from the beachhead. Actual bread, slightly squashed but still soft, and canned beef that doesn't taste like shoe leather. You eat cross-legged in the courtyard, watching bats dart between the castle towers as the sky purples toward night. Later, on watch again, you lean against the same stretch of wall where you stood the previous night. The stars are the same, the owl's call is the same, but something has shifted, maybe in the castle, maybe in you. Shuri no longer feels like an enemy stronghold, just another stop on the long march south. You run your fingers over the stone, wondering how many soldiers before you have stood in this exact spot, watching their own wars unfold across Okinawa's hills. The night smells like damp earth and gun oil. Somewhere below, a man coughs, another snores. The castle holds you all in its ancient embrace, indifferent to your temporary occupation. When your relief comes, you don't immediately move. Just take one last look at the star-pricked sky, the dark humps of the southern ridges, the thin line where sea meets sky. Tomorrow, the march continues. But for tonight, Shuri Castle stands quiet beneath the moon, its stones holding the day's warmth like a memory. The order to move out comes at first light, delivered in that particular pre-dawn hush where even whispered words carry too far. You wake to boots crunching on gravel and the metallic clink of gear being shouldered, sounds that already feel more familiar than your mother's voice. Morning mist clings to the castle's lower courtyards as you form up, turning the stone walls into ghostly outlines. The lieutenant looks even younger in this light, his freshly shaved cheeks gleaming with nervous sweat as he checks his map for the third time. We're heading south to link up with Baker Company, he says, voice cracking slightly on the last syllable. The descent from Shuri's heights feels like stepping down from some ancient throne. Your boots slip on dew-slick steps worn smooth by centuries of royal foot traffic. At the base of the walls, The land opens into rolling hills dotted with pine groves, terrain that would be beautiful if you didn't know what waited in it. The squad moves in staggered formation, each man keeping 5 paces from the next. The farm boy from Iowa walks point, his lanky frame weaving through the undergrowth with surprising grace. Every 100 yards, he raises a fist and the column freezes, listening for sounds that don't belong in the morning chorus of birds and insects. The sun climbs higher, burning off the mist. Heat rises in visible waves from the red clay soil, making the distant hills shimmer like mirages. You pass through an abandoned village, just 3 stone houses with their thatch roofs caved in. A child's wooden doll lies face down in the dirt, its paint peeling from weather exposure. No one comments on it. By midday, the terrain changes. The pines give way to scrub brush and jagged limestone outcroppings. The squad takes cover in a shallow gully to eat cold rations and check maps. Your canteen water tastes faintly of iodine tablets, but you drink it anyway, watching sweat droplets fall onto the soil between your boots. See that ridge? The sergeant points south where the land rises in a series of uneven steps. Baker's supposed to be dug in just beyond. Keep your eyes open. This is perfect ambush country. The afternoon march becomes a study in tension. Every shadowed grove could conceal machine gun nests. Every rock formation might hide snipers. Your shoulders ache from carrying the rifle at ready position, your fingers alternating between numb and prickly around the grip. Then, movement ahead. The point man drops to one knee, hand signal flashing back through the column. You hit the dirt automatically, cheek pressed against warm stone, hearing nothing but your own heartbeat for 3 long breaths. A figure emerges from the brush, an Okinawan woman in faded blue robes, her gray hair tied back with string. She carries a woven basket on one hip, moving with the slow certainty of someone who knows these hills intimately. The interpreter moves forward cautiously, hands visible. Their exchange is too quiet to hear, but you catch the woman's gesture toward the southern ridge, 3 fingers extended, then folded down one by one, counting something, or someone. When she's gone, vanishing into the landscape as suddenly as she appeared, the sergeant exhales through his nose. Baker's got company. Japanese forces dug in along that 3rd ridge. The squad shares looks. 3 ridges mean 3 times the fighting, 3 times the casualties, 3 times the letters home no one wants to write. You push forward anyway because that's what soldiers do. The land rises in gradual swells, each ridge steeper than the last. By the time you spot the first American foxholes, shallow scrapes topped with camouflage netting, the sun hangs low and red behind you. Baker Company's sentry nearly shoots the Iowa boy before recognizing the division patch. His face is all sharp angles under a coating of dirt, eyes darting constantly to the tree line. "Took you long enough," he mutters, lowering his rifle. "They hit us at dawn. Just probing attacks so far, but..." The unfinished thought lingers as you're led to the command post. A sandbagged hollow where a captain with bloodshot eyes studies maps under a flickering lantern. His uniform jacket hangs open, revealing a sweat-stained shirt with what might be dried blood near the collar. "Glad you're here," he says without looking up. "We've got 2 platoons strung along this ridge. Japanese hold the next one over. Expect fireworks tonight." The squad disperses to assigned positions, shallow trenches dug between limestone teeth. Your section overlooks a narrow valley choked with thorny brush. Perfect cover for attackers. Perfect killing ground for defenders. You set to work improving the position, piling rocks into crude firing steps. The soil here is thin and rocky. Every shovel strike sends vibrations up your arms. By the time you've carved out something resembling cover, your hands are bleeding in 3 places. Dusk brings the first mortar round, a single thump from across the valley, then the whistle of incoming death. It explodes 50 yards to your left, showering the position with dirt and pebbles. "Here we go," mutters the man next to you, a replacement from Texas who still polishes his boots. The night unfolds in bursts of violence and stretches of taut silence. Flares cast eerie light over no man's land, revealing shadows that might be bushes or crawling enemies. Twice, the machine guns open up, their tracers stitching red lines across the dark. Each time, you strain to see movement, finger resting lightly on the trigger. Near midnight, a runner brings word that Baker's lost 3 men to a sniper. Their bodies lie somewhere in the valley, unreachable under enemy guns. You drink cold coffee and try not to imagine their faces. The Japanese mortar crew finds their range around 0-200. The first rounds land behind the position, showering you with dirt. The second salvo walks closer. Boom, boom, boom. The last explosion close enough to leave your ears ringing. You curl into the fetal position at the bottom of your hole, helmet pulled low, mouth open to equalize pressure. The world narrows to the smell of wet earth and cordite, the taste of fear like copper pennies on your tongue. When the barrage lifts, the silence feels heavier. Someone coughs. Another man vomits quietly. The sergeant moves down the line, checking each position with a flashlight cupped in his palm. His face is all shadows in the dim light. Stay sharp, he murmurs when he reaches you. They'll try something before dawn. The hours stretch like taffy. You doze in fits, jerking awake at every rustle in the brush. Your rifle becomes an extension of your body, its weight as familiar as your own heartbeat. First light reveals the valley floor littered with debris, broken branches, torn cloth, a single leather sandal lying upside down. No bodies, no enemy positions, just the usual morning mist coiling between the trees like something alive. Breakfast is a cold can of beans passed hand to hand. You eat mechanically, watching the opposite ridge through binoculars. The trees look peaceful in the golden light, their leaves stirring in the breeze. A bird sings somewhere. The lieutenant appears, looking even younger after the long night. "We're pushing across the valley today," he says, as if announcing the weather. Baker's taking the left flank. We've got the right. No one speaks. The unasked question hangs in the air. How many won't make it to the next ridge? You check your rifle again, count your ammunition, adjust your pack straps. The routine is comforting in its familiarity. Around you, other men do the same, each lost in private thoughts, each preparing in his own way. The sergeant walks the line one last time, pausing to adjust a helmet strap here, share a cigarette there. When he reaches you, he doesn't offer platitudes or false encouragement, just meets your eyes and nods. That's enough. The order comes. The squad moves out in staggered waves, rifles at the ready. The valley waits below, innocent looking in the morning sun, its dangers hidden behind every bush and rock. You take a last look at the ridge you're leaving, the shallow holes that were home for one night. Then you step off into the open, the morning air cool on your face, the next chapter of the war unfolding before you. The valley crossing begins with that peculiar lull before action, when time stretches thin as old rubber bands and every sense sharpens to knife-point clarity. You move in short rushes, boots sinking slightly into the damp earth, pulse hammering in your throat. The morning sun hasn't yet burned off the mist clinging to the brush, turning the entire valley into a shifting tapestry of shadows and silvered light. 10 yards. Drop. Scan. 20 yards. Drop. Scan. The squad spreads out like oil separating on water, each man keeping just enough distance to avoid presenting a cluster target. Your rifle feels heavier than usual, the strap biting into your shoulder through the damp fabric of your uniform. Somewhere to your left, a bird calls. 3 sharp notes that sound almost artificial in the tension-thick air. The first mortar round catches everyone mid-stride. It explodes 30 yards to your right with a concussive whump that sends dirt geysering into the air. You're on the ground before conscious thought catches up, face pressed into leaf litter that smells of decay and iron-rich soil. 3 more rounds walk across the valley. Boom, 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 each impact closer than the last. Spread out. Keep moving. The sergeant's voice cuts through the ringing in your ears. You're up and running before the dirt settles, zigzagging between thorn bushes that claw at your uniform. Something hot stings your cheek, a rock fragment or piece of shrapnel, you'll never know which. The blood feels warm as it trickles down to your jawline. A machine gun opens up from the ridge ahead, its distinctive tat-tat-tat stitching through the heavier mortar blasts. Tracers arc overhead like angry fireflies, burning red lines into your vision. You dive behind a limestone outcrop just as a round spangs off the rock where your head had been. The Iowa farm boy isn't so lucky. You see him stumble, just a slight hitch in his stride, before his left leg collapses beneath him. He goes down hard, rolling onto his back with both hands clamped around his thigh. Even from 20 feet away, you can see the dark stains spreading between his fingers. No one hesitates. The medic's moving before the kid hits the ground, dragging him behind cover while two others lay down suppressing fire. You join in, rifle but snug against your shoulder, exhaling halfway before squeezing the trigger like they taught you in basic. The Japanese machine gun nest goes silent. Whether from your shots or someone else's, you'll never know. The medic works fast, tourniquet twisting tight above the wound. The kid's face has gone the color of old paper, but he manages a weak thumbs up when you catch his eye. Two men from Baker Company appear with a stretcher, and just like that, your point man is gone, evacuated back to some aid station, his war potentially over with a single bullet. The squad regroups in a shallow depression, breathing hard. The sergeant checks each man with quick, practiced eyes, lingering on the private hyperventilating in the corner, the corporal whose hands won't stop shaking. When his gaze lands on you, there's no praise, no criticism, just a nod that says you're still functional. Listen up, he growls, tracing a path in the dirt with his knife. Machine gun nest here. Possible mortar position here. We swing wide right. Use that stream bed for cover. No one argues. The stream bed means walking through knee-deep water, but it also means concealment. You check your rifle's action, count your remaining grenades, and try not to think about how exposed you'll be climbing the opposite slope. The next hour passes in a blur of adrenaline and fragmented impressions. The shocking cold of the stream water soaking through your boots. The coppery taste of blood where you bit your tongue during a close mortar impact. The way sunlight glints off the medic's scissors as he cuts away a wounded man's uniform. The smell, God, the smell of burning flesh when a white phosphorus round finds its mark somewhere upslope. By the time you reach the base of the enemy ridge, the sun sits directly overhead, baking the moisture from your uniform until the fabric crackles with every movement. The Japanese positions loom above, sandbagged emplacements barely visible through the brush. The assault goes by the book, grenades first, then concentrated rifle fire while flanking teams advance. You're in the second wave, moving from cover to cover while the lead element draws enemy fire. A bullet parts the hair above your left ear with an audible zip. Another ricochets off your canteen with a metallic ping that vibrates through your ribs. Then you're at the first trench, bayonet fixed, heart pounding so hard you fear it might crack a rib. But the position is empty. Abandoned ration tins. A single discarded boot. Bloodstains darkening the dirt in abstract patterns. The Japanese have pulled back again, leaving only enough evidence to prove they were ever here. The sergeant kicks over an ammo crate, his face unreadable. Bastards are fighting a delaying action, drawing us deeper. You know what he's not saying? Each ridge costs casualties. Each withdrawal stretches supply lines thinner. The Japanese aren't trying to win this valley. They're trying to bleed you dry before the real fighting starts. The squad spreads out to secure the position. You're assigned the eastern flank, a rocky overlook with sightlines stretching back across the valley. From this height, you can see the entire path you've taken. The stream bed where your boots still squelch with every step. The limestone outcrop that saved your life. The distant speck that might be the Iowa kid's blood drying on sun-baked stone. Baker Company's medic appears, his arm sling already stained through. Got a cigarette? You hand him your last one, watching as his trembling fingers struggle with the lighter. When he finally gets it lit, he inhales deeply and exhales through his nose like a dragon in some fairy tale. Lost 4, he says quietly. 4 good men just to take this godforsaken rock pile. You don't answer. There's nothing to say. Dusk finds the squad dug in along the captured ridge. Your foxhole overlooks the next valley, another patchwork of brush and limestone that will need taking tomorrow or the day after. or whenever command decides the butcher's bill is acceptable. The sergeant makes his rounds, checking each position with a quiet word or shared match. When he reaches you, he pauses longer than necessary, studying the darkening landscape below. "Get some rest," he says at last. "They'll hit us tonight." You don't ask how he knows. Some things become instinct after enough nights under fire. Dinner is cold beans and colder coffee, eaten with one hand while the other keeps your rifle upright between your knees. Around you, men talk in hushed tones, about home, about girls, about anything except the day's losses. The farm boy's absence yawns like an open grave. Night falls with its usual symphony of insects and distant artillery. You take first watch, back pressed against the cool earth of your foxhole, eyes straining against the darkness. Somewhere out there, the Japanese are doing the same, watching, waiting, counting the hours until the next clash. The moon rises full and bright, casting enough light to see the valley floor. Movement catches your eye, a shadow detaching itself from the tree line, then another, then three more. Your finger tenses on the trigger, only to realize they're just wild pigs, rooting through the underbrush for whatever pigs eat. You exhale slowly, letting the adrenaline drain away. The pigs move with purpose, utterly indifferent to the war raging around them. One pauses to sniff at a discarded ration tin before moving on. It's strangely comforting, this reminder that life continues despite the carnage. That somewhere beyond the reach of mortars and machine guns, the world still turns on its normal axis. Your relief comes at midnight, the Boston kid with the photographic memory and a wife back home. He slides into the foxhole with practiced ease, trading places without a word. Sleep comes in fits and starts, interrupted by imagined noises and the too-real scream of a distant mortar. You dream of the farm boy standing in an Iowa cornfield, his leg whole, his smile bright. When you wake with a start, the dream lingers like smoke in your clothes. Dawn is still hours away. Somewhere down the line, a man coughs. Another whispers a prayer. The night stretches on, endless and yet fleeting, each minute crawling by even as the darkness seems determined to last forever. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to remember. The farm boy's laugh, the medic's steady hands, the sergeant's quiet confidence. These are the things that will carry you through tomorrow's fight. These, and the cold certainty that the ridge after this one will be worse. The predicted night attack comes not with screams and gunfire, but in whispers and shadows. You're jolted awake by a hand clamping over your mouth. The Boston kid's breath hot in your ear. "Movement at 2 o'clock," he hisses. The world snaps into razor-sharp focus. Moonlight silvering the grass. The metallic taste of adrenaline flooding your tongue. The rifle stock cool against your cheek as you ease into firing position. At first, nothing moves but the wind. Then there, a flicker of shadow among shadows near the abandoned mortar pit. You blink sweat from your eyes, finger resting lightly on the trigger guard. The night holds its breath. A rock clatters somewhere to your left, too loud to be accidental. The sergeant's signal passes down the line, a soft click of tongue against teeth. You brace, muscles coiled, watching the darkness for the first shape that shouldn't be there. It comes from an unexpected angle. 3 figures materializing like ghosts between the boulders on your flank. Their silhouettes are all wrong, too hunched, too angular, until you realize they're wearing foliage-covered netting over their helmets. The first shot cracks the night open. Muzzle flashes bloom across the hillside like deadly fireflies. Tracers stitch red lines through the dark. Someone screaming in Japanese, short, sharp barks that might be commands or curses. A grenade explodes near the machine gun nest, showering your position with dirt and pebbles. You pick a target and fire. Once, twice. The rifles kick familiar as your own heartbeat. The figure jerks, but doesn't go down. You adjust aim slightly higher and squeeze again. This time the shadow crumples silently. Frontals a feint. The sergeant bellows over the gunfire. Watch your flanks. Too late. Dark shapes swarm from the gully behind you, bayonets gleaming wet in the moonlight. The man to your left, the replacement from Texas, turns just in time to take a blade through the throat. Blood arcs black in the pale light as he goes down gurgling. Close quarters becomes a nightmare of muzzle flashes and grunting effort. You club a soldier with your rifle, but feeling cartilage crunch under the impact. He staggers back, clutching his face, just as your bayonet finds his stomach. The resistance, that awful moment when steel parts flesh, sends a jolt up your arms. Then, as suddenly as it began, the attack breaks. The surviving shadows melt back into the night, leaving behind their dead and dying. The sudden silence rings louder than the gunfire. Casualty report. The sergeant snaps, moving down the line with a flashlight cupped in his palm. 3 wounded. 2 dead. The Texan and a quiet kid from Ohio who'd just turned 19. Their bodies lie covered with ponchos until morning, when they'll be carried back to whatever makeshift cemetery the engineers have scratched from the earth. No one sleeps. You spend the remaining hours before dawn cleaning weapons with trembling hands, jumping at every rustle in the grass. The medic makes rounds with his morphine syringes, his face drawn and ancient in the flickering lantern light. First light reveals the hillside littered with evidence. Discarded ammo pouches, blood trails leading into the brush, one Japanese soldier curled fetal around a stomach wound. He can't be more than 16, his face smooth beneath the dirt and pain. The sergeant approaches, pistol drawn. The boy's eyes track the weapon with terrible understanding. His lips move silently, maybe a prayer, maybe a name. The shot echoes across the valley. Breakfast is a silent affair, hardtack and cold coffee that no one has the stomach to finish. You clean the blood from your bayonet with methodical strokes, watching the crimson swirl away into the dirt. The memories will linger longer. The Texan's dying gurgle, the way that boy soldier's hands trembled before the end. Pack up, the lieutenant says, his voice too loud in the morning quiet. We're pushing to the next ridge by noon. No one groans. No one complains. The men simply check their gear with numb efficiency, counting ammo, tightening boot laces, adjusting pack straps over bruised shoulders. The Iowa farm boy's absence yawns wider today, his laughter missing from the morning ritual. The march south is slower this time, more cautious. Every rock formation gets scanned for snipers. Every grove of trees earns a wide berth. The land rises in gradual swells, each ridge slightly higher than the last. By midday, the next objective looms, a tree-covered humpbacked hill the maps designate only as Objective 7B. From this angle, it looks innocuous, just another Okinawan hill studded with limestone and pine. But the lieutenant's map shows red pencil marks along its crest, estimated enemy positions based on aerial photos. The sergeant studies the terrain through binoculars, his mouth a tight line. That's where they want us, he mutters, killing ground on all approaches. The squad spreads out along a shallow depression to wait for orders. You take the opportunity to refill canteens from a nearby stream. It's water cloudy with suspended silt. The purification tablets dissolve slowly, turning the liquid a faint yellow. It tastes of iodine and dirt, but you drink deeply anyway, watching the hill through the trees. A rustle in the brush sets your hand on your rifle, but it's just an Okinawan girl, maybe 12 years old, her kimono torn and streaked with mud. She freezes when she sees you, eyes wide as a spooked deer's. You lower your weapon slowly, reaching for a ration bar with your other hand. Hey, you hungry? The girl doesn't move, doesn't blink, just stands there trembling like a leaf in a storm. The interpreter appears at your shoulder, speaking softly in the local dialect. The girl answers in monosyllables, her voice barely audible. After a moment, she points toward the hill, first at the western slope, then making a sweeping gesture toward the east. She says there's a cave system. The interpreter translates. Japanese have been using it to move between positions without being seen. The sergeant's eyebrows climb his forehead. Ask her if she'll show us. The girl shakes her head violently, backing away until she disappears into the brush like smoke. The lieutenant calls a huddle, maps spread across his knees, compass in hand. If we can find that cave entrance, we might bypass their defenses entirely. The squad exchanges glances. Caves mean close quarters, dark spaces where ambushes wait around every turn. but it's better than charging up that open hillside into machine gun fire. You're assigned to the reconnaissance team. 3 men creeping along the western tree line while the main force provides covering fire. The Boston Kid goes first, his photographic memory perfect for mapping the route. You take rear guard, stepping precisely in the footprints of the man ahead. The cave mouth reveals itself gradually, a darker shadow in an already shadowed hillside. The entrance is low and narrow, barely wide enough for a man to pass sideways. The air that wafts out smells of damp stone and something faintly metallic, blood or gun oil, maybe both. The Boston Kid kneels, examining the dirt floor. Fresh footprints. Multiple pairs. The sergeant nods grimly. Set charges here in case we need to seal it. Then we move. The cave swallows you whole, darkness pressing close as a second skin. Your flashlight beam seems pitifully weak against the endless black, revealing rough-hewn walls slick with condensation. The passage twists and turns, branching occasionally into side tunnels that smell of stale urine and gunpowder. At each intersection, the Boston Kid marks the route with chalk, small arrows barely visible unless you know where to look. The air grows thicker the deeper you go, until every breath feels like inhaling warm soup. Then voices. Japanese, no more than 20 yards ahead around a bend. The sergeant signals halt with a raised fist. You kill your flashlight, plunging the tunnel into absolute blackness. The voices continue, calm, conversational, completely unaware of the danger creeping toward them. The firefight in the confined space is deafening. Muzzle flashes strobe the tunnel walls with nightmare strobe effects. Someone screaming, whether in English or Japanese, you can't tell over the ringing in your ears. When it's over, 5 enemy soldiers lie dead around a makeshift radio setup. The sergeant examines the equipment with professional interest. Forward observer post, he mutters, calling artillery on our positions. The Boston Kid finds the tunnel leading upward, a narrow chimney barely wide enough to climb. This might take us behind their lines, he whispers. You ascend single file, rifles slung across backs to free both hands for climbing. The rock tears at your fingertips, leaving them raw and bleeding. At the top, a rusted grate blocks the way, but it gives with one good kick, spilling sunlight into the shaft. Emerging into daylight feels like being reborn. You blink against the glare, taking in your surroundings. The hill's crest spread before you, Japanese positions dug and facing the opposite direction. They never expected an attack from behind. From within the earth itself, the sergeant grins, the first real smile you've seen in weeks. Let's give them a proper welcome, he says, unslinging his rifle. The assault from the cave mouth unfolds with brutal efficiency, a hammer blow struck from the enemy's blind spot. You emerge coughing into the sunlight, squinting against the glare as your pupils struggle to adjust. The hilltop spreads before you like a tableau. Japanese soldiers crouched behind sandbags, their machine guns pointed downhill toward where they expect the attack to come. None have thought to guard their backs. The sergeant doesn't waste the advantage. 3 grenades arc through the air in perfect unison, your squad's signature opening move. The explosions stitch across the enemy position. Boom, boom, boom. Each detonation perfectly timed to maximize chaos. Dirt and debris fountain into the air as the stunned defenders scramble to understand this attack from the earth itself. You're moving before the shrapnel stops falling, rifle at your shoulder, picking targets with detached precision. A soldier turns toward the noise, his mouth forming a perfect O of surprise just as your bullet punches through it. He crumples like a marionette with its strings cut. The Boston Kid takes point, his photographic memory mapping the enemy positions in real time. Machine gun nest at 10 o'clock, he shouts, ducking as a burst of fire chews the ground where he'd been standing. The squad fans out instinctively, covering fire from the left while the right flank advances. You move in short, controlled bursts, using the terrain's natural folds for cover. A bullet parts the air near your ear with an angry buzz, close enough to feel the wind of its passage. Then, the sweetest sound in combat, the metallic ping of an empty chamber. The Japanese machine gunner fumbles for a fresh magazine, his hands shaking visibly. You don't give him the chance. 2 quick shots, and the nest goes silent. Within minutes, the hilltop belongs to your squad. The surviving defenders either flee down the opposite slope or lie motionless in their fighting holes. The sudden quiet rings louder than the gunfire. Perimeter secure, the Boston Kid calls, wiping blood from a cut above his eye. The sergeant moves through the position with tactical precision, checking bodies for intelligence, marking ammunition caches, directing men to key defensive points. You're assigned to scout the reverse slope, where a crude bunker has been hacked into the hillside. The stench hits you first, the coppery tang of blood mixed with the sweet rot smell of gangrene. Inside, 3 wounded Japanese soldiers lie on straw mats, their bandages brown with old blood. One clutches a photograph to his chest, a woman and child frozen behind cracked glass. Their eyes track you with dull resignation. The medic pushes past, his bag already open. "I've got this," he mutters, kneeling beside the closest casualty. You step back into the sunlight, gulping fresh air to cleanse the death smell from your lungs. The view from the hilltop is unexpectedly beautiful. Rolling green hills stretching to the sea, the distant sparkle of American ships at anchor. It's hard to reconcile this panorama with the carnage at your feet. The lieutenant arrives with the main force, his boyish face flushed with exertion. "Good work," he says, surveying the captured position. "This gives us observation over half the island." Men set to work fortifying the hilltop, digging new firing positions, stringing communication wire, hauling ammunition to strategic points. You help drag enemy dead to a shallow depression where they'll wait for proper burial. Their pockets yield small treasures, a harmonica, a silk handkerchief, letters smeared with mud and blood. By midday, the position resembles something defensible. Sandbag machine gun nests cover every approach. Sniper positions camouflage into the natural rock formations. The radio crackles to life, its operator speaking in the clipped jargon of artillery coordinates. Lunch is a quiet affair, cold rations eaten in the shade of a blasted pine tree. The Boston Kid shares a tin of peaches liberated from enemy supplies, the syrup impossibly sweet on your tongue. "Think they'll counterattack?" he asks around a mouthful of fruit. The sergeant grunts, scanning the terrain below. "Bet your ass they will. This hill's worth 50 men to them." As if summoned by the words, the first mortar round screams in. The explosion kicks dirt 20 feet into the air, showering the position with debris. You're moving before the echo fades, diving for cover as the next rounds walk closer. Boom, boom, boom. The impact's methodical, measured. "Observer must have spotted us," the lieutenant yells over the din. The radio operator works frantically, calling in counter-battery fire. Within minutes, American artillery answers. The deep cough of 105mm howitzers from some distant ridge. Their shells shriek overhead, walking toward the suspected mortar position. The duel continues for half an hour. Boom and counter-boom, until the Japanese fire slackens, then stops altogether. Silence settles like dust after the barrage. Men emerge from cover, checking themselves and their neighbors for wounds. Miraculously, no one was hit, though a near-miss collapsed part of the cave entrance you'd emerged from earlier. The sergeant organizes work details, some to repair defenses, others to scout approaches, a few lucky souls assigned to rest. You draw latrine duty, which at least keeps you away from the exposed hilltop. As evening approaches, the squad gathers for orders. The lieutenant spreads a map weighted with stones, his finger tracing a route south toward the next ridge. "Baker Company's taking heavy fire here," he says, tapping a penciled X. "We move at dawn to relieve them." No one groans. No one complains. The men simply absorb the information with weary acceptance. Another hill, another fight, another name added to the growing list of casualties. Dinner is hot for once. Some clever soul rigged a stove from an empty fuel drum. The smell of heating rations almost covers the lingering stench of death. You eat slowly, savoring each mouthful, watching the sunset paint the western slopes in shades of fire. The Boston Kid joins you, his face drawn with exhaustion. Mail came up with the supply run, he says, handing over an envelope smudged with dirt and fingerprints. Your name stares up from the paper, written in a familiar looping hand. The postmark is weeks old, from a world where people still worry about grocery shortages and movie showtimes. You tuck it inside your shirt, saving it for some quieter moment. Night falls with its usual symphony of insects and distant gunfire. You draw first watch, stationed at the hill's eastern edge where the moon casts enough light to see movement. Below, the land stretches silver and black, a patchwork of shadows that could conceal an army or nothing at all. The hours pass in slow increments marked by the changing positions of constellations. Somewhere around midnight, the medic relieves you, his hands still smelling of antiseptic from tending the wounded prisoners. Sleep comes fitfully in a shared foxhole, the Boston Kid's elbow jabbing your ribs whenever he turns. You dream of caves and collapsing tunnels, of enemy soldiers emerging from the earth itself. Dawn arrives gray and damp, a thick mist clinging to the valleys below. The squad assembles with quiet efficiency, checking gear and weapons with practiced hands. The lieutenant looks even younger in the pale light, his uniform crisp where everyone else's hangs in tattered folds. Listen up, he says, voice cracking slightly. Baker's been pinned down for 36 hours. Our job is to flank the enemy position, and the words fade as your attention drifts to the southern horizon, where the next ridge waits, and the one after that, and the one after that. The war stretches before you like a series of hills to be taken, each bloodier than the last. The sergeant catches your eye and nods, just once, as if to say he sees the same thing. Then he shoulders his pack and steps off toward the waiting fight, leaving you no choice but to follow. The march to relieve Baker Company begins in that peculiar half-light just before dawn, when shadows cling stubbornly to the earth and every rock looks like a crouching enemy. You move in single file, rifles at the ready, boots crunching on gravel still damp with dew. The trail winds downward from your captured hilltop, each step taking you deeper into mist-shrouded valleys where visibility drops to 20 feet. The sergeant sets a brutal pace, fast enough to reach Baker before full daylight, slow enough to avoid walking into an ambush. Your pack straps dig into shoulders already raw from weeks of chafing. The canteen at your hip sloshes rhythmically, a metronome counting down the distance. First light reveals the land in fragments. A twisted pine here, a rusted farming implement there, the occasional crater from artillery long since fallen silent. The mist plays tricks on your eyes, transforming stumps into sentries, boulders into bunkers. Every man jumps at shadows, fingers resting lightly on triggers. Then, movement ahead. The column freezes as one. The point man drops to a knee, hand signal flashing back through the squad. You sink slowly into the undergrowth, rifle trained on the shifting shape in the fog. A figure materializes, an American helmet bobbing awkwardly as its wearer limps toward you. His uniform hangs in tatters, one arm bound to his chest with blood-soaked bandages. His eyes are the worst part, hollow and staring like a man who's seen beyond the veil. Baker Company, the sergeant whispers. The soldier nods, his cracked lips parting to reveal missing teeth. What's left of us? He leads you the final half-mile to their position, a shallow depression barely worthy of being called a foxhole. 8 men remain from a company that started at 200. They look up as you arrive, their faces gaunt beneath layers of dirt and stubble. The lieutenant, if he still can be called that, is maybe 22, with a field dressing wrapped around his thigh and a pistol clutched in shaking hands. Took you long enough, he croaks, attempting a smile that dies before it reaches his eyes. The sergeant surveys the position with a professional eye. The empty ammunition crates, the blood-stained dressings piled in a corner, the single machine gun with its barrel warped from overheating. Sitrap. The Baker lieutenant gestures south where the mist is thinning to reveal another ridge. Japanese have been hitting us from those caves every night. We counterattack, they fade into the tunnels. Rinse and repeat. A private with a bandaged head interjects. They're like ghosts, Sarge. Come right through the goddamn walls. The squad spreads out to reinforce the position, some digging new firing steps, others redistributing ammunition. You're assigned to the listening post, a shallow scrape 30 yards forward of the main line where you'll watch for enemy movement. The Boston Kid joins you, his photographic memory already mapping the terrain. That's where they'll come from, he murmurs, pointing to a limestone outcrop that seems to breathe mist. The hours crawl by. The sun climbs, burning off the fog to reveal a landscape of scrub brush and jagged rock. Nothing moves but the wind and the occasional lizard darting between stones. Your knees ache from kneeling, your eyes from staring. Then, a sound that doesn't belong. Not the metallic clink of gear or the crunch of boots on gravel, but something softer. A whisper of cloth on stone. The Boston Kid tenses beside you, his breathing shallow. They emerge like specters from the very rock. 3 Japanese soldiers in faded uniforms, their faces smeared with dirt to break the outline. They move with eerie synchronization, bayonets glinting as they pass through a shaft of sunlight. The Boston Kid squeezes your arm, once for warning, twice for confirmation. You nod imperceptibly, rifle already coming to bear. The first shot cracks the stillness like a whip. Your target drops without a sound. The other 2 scatter, one diving for cover, the other charging straight at you with a scream that freezes the blood in your veins. You work the bolt mechanically, eject, chamber, fire. The charging soldier staggers, but keeps coming, his bayonet aimed at your throat. At the last possible second, the Boston Kid's rifle barks, a single shot that punches through the man's temple and drops him mid-stride. The survivor vanishes as suddenly as he appeared, melting back into the limestone maze. The valley falls silent again, as if the entire engagement was some collective hallucination. Jesus Christ, the Boston Kid breathes, wiping sweat from his upper lip. They really do come through the walls. You check your fallen attacker, a boy no older than 17 with a faded prayer scroll stitched into his uniform lining. His eyes stare skyward, already filming over. You close them gently with your thumb before retrieving his ammunition. The squad spends the afternoon fortifying the position, stringing tripwires, marking ranges, clearing fields of fire. The sergeant organizes rotating watches and assigns men to rest in shifts. You draw the first sleep rotation, curling up in a shallow scrape with your helmet for a pillow. Sleep comes in fits and starts, interrupted by distant gunfire and the ever-present fear of cave-born attackers. You dream of tunnels that never end, of enemies emerging from the very earth beneath you. Dusk brings renewed tension. The squad eats cold rations with one hand, rifles cradled in the other. The Boston Kid passes around a tin of peaches liberated from your hilltop capture, each man taking precisely one slice to stretch the meager comfort. As full dark settles, the sergeant makes his rounds, checking each position with a quiet word or shared cigarette. When he reaches your foxhole, he pauses longer than necessary, studying the star-pricked sky. "They'll come tonight," he says at last, "probably from multiple directions." You don't ask how he knows. Some things become instinct after enough nights under fire. The attack comes just past midnight, not with screams and fanfare, but in whispers and shadows. First, a tripwire snaps somewhere to your left. Then, movement at the edge of your vision. You blink, unsure if you're seeing shapes or just imagining them. The first muzzle flash answers the question. The night erupts in strobes of gunfire, tracers arcing through the dark like angry fireflies. Someone shouts, "Grenade," just before an explosion showers your position with dirt and pebbles. You return fire methodically. Aim, exhale, squeeze. Each shot a small defiance against the pressing dark. The Boston Kid's rifle barks beside you, its report sharp and clean amidst the chaos. Then, the sound you've been dreading. A scrabbling from behind, where the limestone wall should be solid. You turn just as a section of rock pivots inward, revealing a tunnel mouth and the shapes pouring from it. The Boston Kid spins, firing from the hip. One attacker drops, then another. The third is faster. His bayonet takes the Boston Kid high in the chest, punching through lung and muscle with a wet crunch. You're moving before conscious thought catches up, tackling the attacker with your full weight. The impact drives the breath from both of you as you roll together in the dirt. His breath smells of rotting teeth and sour rice. You grapple for his knife, fingers slipping on sweat-slick skin. Somewhere beyond the adrenaline roar, the Boston Kid is gasping like a landed fish. Your hand finds a rock. Once, twice, 3 times you smash it into the soldier's face until he goes limp beneath you. The medic arrives in a flurry of bandages and morphine syringes. The Boston Kid's eyes are wide with pain and something else, recognition, maybe, that this wound is beyond his buddy's skill. His lips move silently around words you'll never hear. Then, nothing. Just another still shape in a war that makes corpses faster than it makes sense. The medic closes those 2 seeing eyes with gentle fingers. He's gone. The firefight rages on around you. But for one suspended moment, the world narrows to this. The Boston Kid's blood soaking into Okinawan soil, his letters home still tucked in his breast pocket. Then the sergeant's hand is on your shoulder, his voice cutting through the fog. "We need that machine gun." You nod, because what else is there to do, and turn back toward the fight. The night stretches on, endless and yet fleeting. The attacks come in waves, each repelled with bullets and grenades and raw desperation. By dawn, the position still holds, but the cost is written in the poncho-covered shapes lining the trench. The Boston Kid, 2 others from your squad, half of what remained of Baker Company. The sun rises on a world gone strangely quiet. The Japanese have withdrawn again, back into their caves and tunnels, to lick wounds and plan the next assault. You sit with your back against the limestone wall, staring at nothing. The letter in your pocket, the one you'd saved for a quiet moment, suddenly feels like a weight you can't carry. The sergeant appears, his face drawn with exhaustion. "We're pulling back to the hilltop," he says. "Regroup and resupply." No one argues. No one complains. The survivors simply gather their gear with numb efficiency, checking weapons, counting ammunition, leaving the dead for the burial detail. You take one last look at the valley, its morning mist already burning away to reveal another perfect Okinawan day. Somewhere beyond those ridges, the war continues. Somewhere beyond those ridges, the next hill waits. But for now, there's only the long walk back, one foot in front of the other, carrying the weight of the fallen with every step.